Let's bring in Colonel Ralph Peters. He's here. Great to have you here as always, Colonel. My question is, and I'm sure other people think the same thing, we have this amazing technology on our military, you know, on our Navy ships. Here we have a destroyer that's pretty nimble. Why does this keep happening?
Well, the obvious conclusion is the officers on the bridge and the seamen don't have basic navigation skills. They no longer are drilled in basic seamanship. They don't have the discipline they should. I mean, look, I love the U.S. Navy. It's vital to our national defense. I'd argue it's the paramount service. But it's in a bad way right now. It's coming off the vast, fat Leonard corruption scandals. You had the horrific behavior of the sailors who were grabbed by Iran without a fight. But I think part of this problem, and we'll see what the whole problem is, part of it is fundamental. That those sailors did not have the basic seamanship skills. But by God, they got their sensitivity training, they got their race relations training, they got their sexual harassment training. And we have, for a long time, but particularly under Obama, turned the military into a social engineering experiment. And no, the purpose of a military is to fight. And for the Navy, boy, you can't fight if you don't have basic navigation skills. And the nonchalance, the neglect, the lack of focus that goes into an accident like this is just appalling. The one off the coast of Japan, twice is too much.
Twice in 2 months. Next one for you, Colonel, and this is important, of course, as always. President Trump, we know now, is going to address the nation tonight on U.S. involvement in Afghanistan and South Asia. Question I have for you is, are we going to hear about more troops going, and what's your thought about that to Afghanistan?
Well, the RUMINT, which is rumor intelligence, has it that we'll have about 3,000 more troops sent to Afghanistan. And, you know, it sounds like a relatively small number, but there are three problems here. The first is that will bring our troop level up to about 13,000. How on earth can we expect 13,000 troops to do what 140,000 U.S. and allied troops couldn't do at the peak of our commitment when the Taliban was much weaker? The second problem is, you know, I understand it, but we have military leaders who've served in Afghanistan and they've got this emotional attachment because they saw their soldiers and Marines die there, and they don't want to let go. But you know, it's the principle of sunk costs. Actually, you got to know when to stop investing in the losing stock.
So, and Colonel, let me stop you right there. So I feel like you're saying it's time to pull out.
Well, I would leave a residual force of around a little bit smaller than we have now, about 5,000, to do some fundamental training, but primarily to kill terrorists. The only reason for us to be in Afghanistan today is to keep killing terrorists. But here's the bottom line, Ashley. If the people of Afghanistan will not fight for their own government, why should U.S. troops fight for it? If the Afghans won't save that government, we can't save it. And by the way, we are so emotionally involved in this that we can't see what's obvious. The Pashtun majority in Afghanistan views the Taliban as a home team. Now, after 16 years, the Taliban, we've hammered them with everything we've got, and they're still there. People are still volunteering to fight for the Taliban, and they're not willing to die for the Kabul government. If we can't, I mean, it's so obvious that this is an impossible situation, but at the end of the day, look, this is ugly. I have no sympathy with the Taliban. They're a bunch of brutal, woman-hating pederasts. But by God, for the locals, we're the Redcoats and they're the Minutemen.
Yeah, but it doesn't help when Pakistan keeps offering safe haven for the Taliban.
That's certainly true, but at the same time, Pakistan has certainly offered safe havens, and we've tolerated it, and that was wrong. But look at, we spent well over $1 trillion total in Afghanistan. We've had the jets. We've had the sophisticated weapons, the sophisticated intelligence. We've given the Afghan military equipment. We've given them training. We've poured money into the Afghan government, and the Taliban are still there. And I had a very high-ranking general, one who I respect very much. I'll leave his name out of it. Over the years, we've talked about this, and he kept telling me the same thing. The Taliban are lousy fighters. Well, you know what? The Minutemen at Concord and Lexington were lousy fighters. They lost tactically in the U.S., I should say, in the early years of our revolution. We kept losing tactically, but we won strategically. And what the Taliban are doing is losing tactically. They're lousy fighters compared to our troops, but they're winning strategically, and we just can't face up to it.
All right. Colonel Ralph Peters, stay right there.